Hey, so to start off with, I've finally worked out why I can't reformat code in Rider, and that's because the file ends in tests.cs. Any other file is fine. So, that out of the way, I think the first task this evening is to set up our fake data store for our toggles so that we can actually start returning some real data, and then start saving some real data as well. So to do that, hopefully, here we should be able to get at the container. Add singleton, and this takes in iServiceProvider, iImplementation. So we will pass in an iStorage and to that we will pass in an in-memory storage. Now, this on its own will not help us. We need to implement a way to be given... Actually, you know what? We'll start with this. We'll extract some logic later on, but to start with, we can work with this. So if we go into our command handler down here, where we've got some fake data, we can instead create a constructor, and in here we can take in our iStorage. We'll save this to a field, and then down here we will be able to say using var session equals storage dot begin session. Now in here we'll have access to load aggregates. We don't have the ability to load a view from this yet, apparently. I can populate them, but we can't get them from here. Well, that's a problem because we actually want a view at the moment. Let's have a look at iStorage. Well, as we register a projection, we can have a load projection on iSession. So let's go into the iStorage session. So we have load aggregate. I guess we should have tview load view. Or do we want to call it load projection? Because we register projections which populate views, and now we want to load a view. Let's call it load projection for now. Because anyway, our projection logic is inside one class, along with the view. So that might need to change in the future as well, but for the time being, this will do. T projection. Don't actually need any more to it than that, because our projections are only registered by type anyway. So if we build this, we should get a build error. Several, in fact, because we can't do that yet, so we'll come back to that in a minute. And our iStorage session now needs its missing load projection. Now we have the projections list already available to us, so here we can just say return projections dot first or default. Do we have? No, we don't. Right, so projection equal where projection. You know what, we'll read a bit better if we just did this instead. Of type T projection first or default. And I have just realized that our storage session probably should be constraining this as well. So we'll say where T projection is an I projection. We'll just put that implementation onto here. as well. And let's put that on on another line so we have it all on one screen. Right. We'll add some tests for this in a second, but it's much more interesting to actually run the application. Not that we've got anything registered in it yet. We'll have to fix that as well. Right. Yeah, I don't actually care about that. Right, back to our handler. So we can now uncomment this, and we can now fetch our projection, which is a all toggles. Just do that, and now we can say return projection.toggles. Oh, no, we can't. We have to actually return a decent type. So new GetToggles response, and that is toggles equals. Oh, plastic keyboard. I've been typing in Finnish keyboard all day, and so now my typing goes to pot while I try and remember how to type on an English keyboard. Right. Yes, good. So I can't actually debug this because Rider doesn't seem to support .NET Core 2 debugging. That's one of the error messages we get when loading, that it's not entirely supported. We can build things and we can run them, but debugging doesn't happen. So with luck, if we run the REST API now, we shouldn't get any errors, but we should get a blank response back from our toggles endpoint, as our projection is going to be blank. Actually, we should get an error, I think. Right, let's use the REST client in Rider. We'll do a get to localhost 5000 to the path toggles. Yes, we do get an error. Now I believe this will be because we haven't got any projections registered and we've just tried to get one. Toggles handler line 25. Get all toggles handler. Yeah. So we've just tried to read that, which is null. Well, at least it does what we expect, even if that's not what we want to happen. So we can go back into our startup. Now, can I get an instance of this somewhere? App dot get, no, build, no, I don't want to do that either, maybe resolve. Nope, right, we'll do it the other way, which is, I assume this lets us pass in a concrete type as well. It does, excellent. So if we now create a variable of that, we'd obviously have proper setup of this store when we use something that actually stores events rather than our in-memory implementation. But as this is just to prove that the API works, we can use our in-memory one, and we shall just do some setup in here. So register projection, new all toggles. That'll do for now, I think. It should be blank, so now when we rerun the application, which is that one, this time we should get an empty JSON body back. Interestingly, my laptop seems to be happier about running with an external screen now that I've found an HDMI cable rather than using VGA. I'm not quite sure why a VGA connection uses more power, but there we have it. Right, so we now have our list of toggles back, but we've made an error in the controller. When I say we, I mean I. Because we're just returning our response straight away. And our response from mediator, if we do GetAllToggles response, as you can see, has this toggles property. But we just want to return the toggles themselves, so here we can just say response.toggles. And let's rerun that. And then I think it's time to write some tests. Well, that was unexpected. No, actually it was expected. No, that's right. We've got an empty JSON array back. Good, so that works as expected. So, first thing we did is we added a new method to our where is it? Our storage session. Sorry, my phone's going off. There's been a stabbing in the city I live, so a lot of people checking that I'm not stabbed. I'd like to report that I am not stabbed. Okay. I don't think I'd be streaming if I'd been stabbed. Right, so our in-memory session tests. So let's add a fact when retrieving. Is that how you spell retrieving? I suspect not. Doesn't look right, but it's English, so it might be. EVE. Oh well, when retrieving a projection from the session. So we need that. And then we can just say session.get load projection all toggles should be projection. When retrieving a projection, let's have when retrieving a projection which exists in the session. And now we'll do the same thing but for one that doesn't exist. Always forget to test my unhappy paths if I'm not careful. So when retrieving a projection which doesn't exist in the session. So we don't need to do any setup. We should say should throw should throw. What error should it throw? I want a nice error. I want a projection not found error. Projection not found, not registered. Not registered. And to trigger said exception, we just need to do _session dot load projection all toggles. Right. So now we need to add this somewhere. It's relevant to projections, so we'll put it in here. Is there a nice exception generator? No. Now I wonder if Rider can do generation of the exception classes. No. Let's try this X. Public. No. I can't remember all the constructors that you're supposed to put in an exception. Oh, maybe that does it. No, maybe not. Right. And I think for our error message we should have the name of the projection that was missing and a nice error message. So string projection name, and here we shall do base. We have message, so let's do that. Unable to find a how to word this. There was no projection registered called projection name /n/n. Did you forget to call iStorage? Is it iStorage or iStore? iStorage dot register projection name. It's always nice to be very helpful with error messages, so be helpful, I shall try. And now we need to actually throw that error message from somewhere. Let's go to our in-memory session. You see here we're doing first or default. So var projection equals that. Let's do this. If projection equals null, throw new one of these. What's your problem? Not quite sure. Right, I just copied that from the class where I implemented it. Because I implemented it in the wrong project. It's alright, just fix your namespaces. Right, now we can actually throw it from here. And our projection name is type of tProjection dot name. Otherwise return projection. Can I invert this? Invert if. There we go. That's better. Right, so our tests should now pass. Yes, because we're now a .NET Core 2 application, because of the .NET Core 2 API, we can't run the tests in here anymore. So we have to use the command line. .NET test source Crispin tests Crispin. Right, so now let's commit those. Add star.session.cs. Let's diff those. Oh, we've got some bad spacing at the end of something. Oh, where is it? Yeah, there. Alright, re-add the sessions. And we had a new exception, so that's source Crispin infrastructure storage. Oh, would help if I had the word add in there rather than just get in a path. Do we need anything else? Should probably add the test really. Git add source Crispin.tests infrastructure. Yep. What do we have left here? Right, just stuff that we don't want to commit yet. Okay, so I storage session add method to load projections. Right, so now that we can load projections and know that it works, we've already tested that our toggle handler works. We tested it by running it though. So one of the main advantages of using Mediator is that we can use we can now write tests on both sides of the mediation pipeline. We can write a test for this handler by injecting a storage session and then passing in a fake message with whatever details we want. And we can also write a test for this controller by passing in a fake mediator and then calling the get method and checking that we get the right kind of request sent. And we can write a separate test which, when calling this, asserts that we get the right kind of response written back, so that, like a check that we're returning the array of toggles rather than the full mediator response. Let's not move that. Right, so let's add a test for the handler first. So we need a new namespace. Handlers. Not sure if I'm going to leave them in a handlers folder, but that's where they are for now. GetAllToggles handler tests. Right. We'll do underscore handler equals new GetAllToggles handler. And that takes in some storage, so we shall fake a storage. Storage equals substitute for I storage. And we already know that storage, okay, let's implement the field first. Read only. We already know that this is going to have begin session called on it. Returns underscore session. In fact, this doesn't need to be member level at all. We can get away with having it like this, because the only thing we actually care about from a test perspective is what's in the session. Do that. So we'll say var underscore session equals substitute for I storage session. And let's create a variable for that, and one for that. Now we can write our first test. So our tests are when there are no toggles in the projection. I suppose first we should check that when there is no projection registered, when phone again. Okay, hang on. Okay. When there are toggles in the projection. Right, so when there is no projection registered, no setup required. We can just do should throw projection not registered exception underscore handler dot handle new request. Right, when there are no toggles in the projection. So now we need to register the projection. So we shall say underscore session dot load projection get. No, it's called all toggles, I think. Yep. Returns projection. Var projection equals new get all toggles. No, all toggles. And then we can do the test, which is handler.handle new get all toggles request. Now we need to await it. Var response equals await. Let's make this an async task. And then we can say response.toggles should be empty. And likewise, we'll need roughly the same block of code for this, except our projection now needs something. So projection.consume new toggle created event, which gets a good new ID, a name, test, and description, desk. This also needs to be an async method. And now our toggles should have single item. Let's remove our bad white space and run the tests. Oh yeah, can't run them in here. I'm going to get fed up of writing that, so while that runs, let's copy this and write a quick bash script to do it for me. So test.sh hash exclamation mark bin sh, run that. Right, we have a test failure. Should throw projection not registered exception. Ah, yes. Now, how do you set up? Get, no, okay. Let's do session dot load projection. I was wondering how you do arg.any in this. But maybe you can't. Oh well. All toggles throws new projection not registered exception. What? Oh, let's test that our script works. Great. So let's add source Crispin.tests projections. No, that's not what we added a test for. Handlers. You can see it. Oh, I suppose we should actually do git add source Crispin handlers as well. Handlers implement get all toggles to use by store. And let's add the test script as well. Scripts add test script. Right. So now that we've done that, let's go back into our REST API. And we shall now do store.registerBuilder toggle. Well, no, I don't think I need that. I can just do this events toggle creates toggle.load from. Still haven't figured out where that's coming from yet. That does really weird things, right? And the events goes in there. So now our store can actually load the projections and load aggregates as well, and also save them. So now let's implement saving a toggle. We'll start off at the controller level. So we have a get method, so now let's add a post. Public async task of I action result post. And this is a root of none. I'm not sure if you have to specify a root if you don't want anything on it, but no harm in leaving it there. This is a post. Now, how good is ASP's model binding? Because what I'm going to want to do is put a model in here. But we now need to create some types. So we need to do something along the lines of var request equals new create toggle request, and that will take some data in from somewhere, and then we will have a response which will be var response equals await mediator send request. We'll also need to come back and deal with validation at some point as well, but for the time being I am purposely ignoring that. New can I do created? Yeah, and now we will have a URI back for it from somewhere, but for the time being we'll just do toggles slash plus response ID. Oh, and our root was actually going to be that, wasn't it? Right, now these aren't much use on their own, so let's create our types. So if we go back to this handler's namespace, we'll have a create toggle request handler. And this will need a public class create toggles request and a public class create toggles response. And the request implements I request of create toggles response, and our handler implements I async request handler of create toggle request create toggle response. And as before, we will need to pass in the I storage, and we will need to do something in here. So I guess we need to say using var session equals storage begin session dot save. Now we need to pass in our aggregators, so we need to create our new toggle equals toggle dot create new. We need a way to get the current user ID, the name, a description which is optional. So these things need to come off of our message. So we have message user ID, message dot name, and message dot description. This now tells us what properties we need to actually have on our message. Wow, that's staggeringly unhelpful. Right. So I did that, and then I hit Control minus, hoping it would jump the caret back to where it was before I hit Alt Enter, and it jumped me to somewhere else. Right. So we now have our properties. So we can now say new toggle goes in there. And let's format that onto new lines. Right, and then we need to return a result of some form. So we have a new toggle response, and all we're returning to the UI at the moment is a created response, which I think is 201, and a URL for where the resource is going to be located. So all we need to do is have an ID in here, say toggle ID equals new toggle.id. And we'll create that on there as well. Right. So now if we go back to our controller, we now need to fill in this data. So our user ID, we still don't know where that's coming from. Our name and our description need to come from somewhere. And I think it's going to be the post body. Now, rather than using this as the model, what we'll do is create a separate model type. The reason for this is we don't want to map straight to this request. We want to pass some validation first. We don't want to, I can't remember what the name of the vulnerability was, but should we add something to this that is only going to be set by us? For instance, this user ID. I imagine we're going to call out to something like, I don't know, HTTP, can we get the request here? Request dot auth. I have no idea how we're going to do this, but we might be getting this from a header or something, or somewhere else. We wouldn't want to have that postable by the user. We might be fetching this from, I don't know, if they're using a local domain, maybe we're fetching the current login information from IIS. We don't want the user to be able to overwrite it with arbitrary stuff in the post body. So what we need is a model. So we'll have our toggle post model. Model. Yeah, we'll call it model because we've already got a variable called request. And here we're going to say it's got a public string name. And a public string description. And here we can now say model.name, model.description. And our response has a toggle ID in it. Alright, what is the problem with that? String object, URI object. What is the object? That doesn't tell me. Does something want to tell me what this is? Object value. So we could actually return a toggle view for that. But I don't want to, so I'm just going to do that for now. Yeah, that should maybe work. Also means that when this gets saved, we will then be able to fetch from there. Let's see. So again, let's use the Restful service testing tool. Right. So now that the server's running, if we do a GET request to the toggles endpoint, we get in a blank response. And now we're going to do a post here. Can I add some text to it somehow? This really doesn't work in presentation mode. Right. And as I want to check that it does what I want, I'm going to use different casing. Name test toggle. Description. Hi there. That's all valid, isn't it? Yeah, looks it. Can we set a request header? Content type application JSON. I don't know if there's more below that, but we can't see it, so not a lot we can do about it. So if we just move this down so we can see this console, can I clear this? Ah. Large text, small text. Right. Ooh, so we got an error there. Let's see what our problem was. Toggle must have a non-white space parameter name. Right, that would indicate that did not get populated as we expected. Now, I don't know if it's down to this name description. Let's try again. Clear. Nope, clearly not down to that. Now, the shame is I can't debug this because .NET. Well, I suppose technically because Rider doesn't support it yet. So we're going to have to try and figure out why model binding is not working as I expect it to. Right, now there used to be an attribute we could do from body. I don't like having to put that in there. I think it should just work as I expect. But let's see if this actually fixes the problem. I mean, if anyone actually knows the answer to this, feel free to shout in the chat. Build succeeded. Alright, clear this lot. And let's try again. Request. Yep, and we've got the right content type. So we didn't get a response body, but we did get a 2-at-1 created, and we have a toggle with an ID and a URL. Or, yeah, a URL with the ID in it. So that's great that that worked, but now if we go back here and do a get to the toggles endpoint, yay, we now get 1 toggle back in our collection. So that works, but I'd rather not have to specify this for post bodies. So let's see if there's spnet core model binding. Improvements to model binding. Let's see, JSON. Binding formatted data from the request body. Note, there can be at most 1 parameter with the from body. Oh, so you do have to do it. XML serializing. What, blah, blah, blah. Oh well, we shall stick with that for the time being then. And we're also going to need to do something about this, because I really don't want these URLs hard-coded. But, again, for the time being, this works. Let's see what we've done. Well, let's write some tests before we go committing things. So again, in here, class get, create toggle handler tests. When a toggle is created. Now I'm considering what I want to do about creating toggles that already exist, like by name. So I don't think we should allow two toggles to have the same name, because that would be very confusing. And that's someone else checking I'm not being stabbed. Yeah. Hang on, just need to reply to this. Hi folks, I am streaming, I've not been stabbed, don't worry. Right, good, that's that one done. Interestingly, despite the stabbing happening in a small town in Finland, I found out about it from an English friend who texted me and said, "Hey, hope you're alright," and I was like, "What's happened?" So that's how I found out about it. Right, so we need our handler. Oh, Vitor, underscore handler equals new create toggle handler session, nope, store, var store equals substitute for store, I storage, oh my typing, really, store dot begin session returns new, no it doesn't, not new, underscore session, and underscore session equals substitute for I storage session. That's going to be read only. Let's count that. Good. Right. So what we can say is handle new create toggle request. I think I'm going to refactor this ever so slightly, and I'm going to require these all to be set through the constructor, because otherwise I will forget to set something. Like if you add another property to this, you have to remember to go through the code and find every place that creates an instance and sets all the properties. If you add a property and just add it to the constructor, you have compile errors everywhere. I'd much rather have a compile error than rely on my memory, which is terrible at best. So string user ID. Oh, I wonder if I can just use auto population. Yes, much better. Now I don't have to type so much. String name description. Yep, good. So we now need to go into our controller and just. There's Sealer. I'd forgotten to set the user ID. Not that I know where the user ID is coming from, but at least I can now actively not set it. Model model.name, model.description. Right. And now in the tests, so we now need a user ID, a name, test, and a description. And all we need to do is var response equals await response dot toggle ID should not be GUID dot empty. Well, technically we're testing the implementation of something now. No, that's fine. We can also say, do that, and then we'll say underscore session save, no, dot received, yeah, arg dot is toggle t dot id double equals response dot toggle id. So did the same toggle ID we get returned to us, did that and get called onto the session. Yep. And we'll run the tests again. Again, I can't run the tests in Rider due to not quite supporting .NET Core 2. What's my keyboard? The keyboard I am typing on at the moment is a UK British English layout, and I use a Finnish keyboard at work. And although I can type on both, I end up with a bit of muscle memory issue when I switch between the two. And occasionally there's some other shortcut key other than Windows key space which switches language, and just occasionally I hit something which flips the keyboard language on my UK keyboard and then confuses the hell out of me for the next 5 minutes. Right, so did that pass? I didn't really read it. Yes, it did. Right, add anything called create toggle. Do I need to do that? Oh no, I need to have .cs at the end. Or another star. There we go. Yep, and we'll also add the controller as well. Yep, I'm just going to check out that, undo that file, get checkout, source, Crispin.tests, projections. That's better. Right. Rest. What's the project called? It's called Rest. Rest. Implement toggle creation. We might as well commit this as well. Yeah. Rest. Implement use fake in memory storage. Right. So we can now create toggles and we can load them. Oh, let's split those into matching files. Why does this dialog not have its default options ticked anymore? Is there a setting for that, I wonder? Maybe. Handlers move types into separate files. Right. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the stream that I wanted to do something about the handlers themselves, in that we're taking in storage and then starting a session. I've been considering using a decorator for this instead, and actually passing in the session, rather than passing in the storage. But in retrospect, I think I actually prefer having the storage engine passed in rather than the session, because potentially a handler will do some validation or do something and then might not start a session. And at the moment we're using an in-memory store, so creating and disposing a session really doesn't matter. But if it was a more expensive solution, like SQL storage of some form, then we might want to avoid it. What are we development, gentlemen, if I can ask? I am writing a feature toggling service. REST API and event sourcing for storage. And I'm writing it for fun, and I'm going to try and stream the whole development of it. It's available on my GitHub if you want to have a look at the source in your own time. github.com/ponderdom/Crispin. Hope that answers your question. Right. Our next new asyncs. Yes, I think there's some other areas which I need to put async in, and I think we'll change up the storage system to be async friendly later on. Mostly when we actually implement something like a file system based one or a SQL based storage, because that's more likely to have async support. I'm trying to keep things as simple as I can to start with. Right, on the REST API. Let's have a look at our README file a second. Oh, it's already open. So we've done that. We've done that. Done that. And that. And that. Oh, I want to retest that toggles actually. Now that we've got the toggle controller with this from body parameter, I just want to check that we can actually use lowercase naming as the keys rather than having to match the casing of this. I think it should be fine, but I want to double check. And while I'm about to write some tests for these controllers, I'm not quite sure how I'd test the serialization side of things, because our tests will actually pass in our own models. The difference of .NET Core versus normal. .NET Core is newer. It's cross-platform, so it runs on Linux, which is one of my goals. I want to deploy this in a Docker container or directly onto Linux hardware. It does have a few issues. I'm not entirely convinced that .NET Core is ready for production yet. It works, but there's rough edges to it, I'd say. And also it's quite a lot faster, it seems, especially for HTTP servers, and less tightly bound to IIS, which is a great thing, because the further away from IIS I am, the better. Give me Nginx any day. Right. So if we do a get, we should get nothing back. We do. And now if we do a post again, but this time we shall change our body to have lowercase names rather than uppercase. We've got the right headers in place. Response at 201 created. So now if we do another get request, and we get, hi there, test double. Great, so the serialization does work. Good to verify. Now I keep mentioning that we can write controller tests, so I think we shall. Do I want to put the tests for the controllers and just have one test assembly for everything, or do I have a test assembly for the rest and a test assembly for the domain? The advantage of splitting it is I cannot have namespace clashes then. Yeah, I think we'll have a separate project. So let's do add new project. I can't remember if I used that last time or not. I'm just going to do that and then copy the old project. So this is going to be called Crispin.rest.tests, and it's not going in there, it is going in there. What do you think? Right. Now, as I can never remember what I need to do to make things work, that's the other thing with .NET Core. You get a much nicer CS project file format. That's the whole CS project file format for my test project, which is great. So we actually want all of this, but with one extra reference. So we'll go in here, do that, and then we'll do this. I'll just copy this line, paste that in there, and it's just .rest. Save that. It'll now go ballistic, downloading half the internet. That pop-up offsets the status bar. That's weird. While that's downloading the internet, let's just copy the scratch pad in. Fix the namespace. Oh, rest. I can type. Yep, good. Synchronizing. Right, build everything, and while that builds, let's just do this, add source Crispin.rest.tests. Has changed in that. Well, the solution file is fine, and we have a blank line in that one. Right. So let's add the solution file, and we'll add the README as well. Tests, add rest test project. And we'll just check out that as well, because there's no point having just a blank line there to confuse me. I'm confused enough without blank lines. Right, so in here, let's create a folder called toggles to match our namespace up here. And in here, we shall add a class called toggles controller tests. So our constructor, we will create a new instance of the controller. What's new toggles controller? Alright, I put 2 C's in there, IntelliType fails. And 1 L. And we need a mediator on that, but we're going to use a fake mediator. Equals substitute for iMediator. It'll be like that. Right, create a field for that, make it read only. Create a field for that, make it read only. I really wish it would make them read only by default. Right, so let's test the happy path first for fetching toggles. We might end up wanting to split this in multiple classes actually. Well, we'll do one to start with. You know, we're not going to need, we might not need splitting classes, so let's not do it until we do actually need it. When getting all toggles and there are none, and then we'll have a happy case for when there are toggles, when getting all toggles and there are some. So for this we need to set up mediator. We say mediator dot send arg.any of get all toggles request, request not response, returns a new response. And I can't remember if that, oh, that doesn't initialize it, but it probably should do. It's enumerable empty. Oh, that needs a blank line at the end of the file. Oh, damn. Right. So when any kind of get or toggles request comes in, we will return a toggles response, which will be blank, no toggles in it. And now we just say var response. No, we'll leave it response for now. Response equals controller.get. So this is our get action, which takes no parameters. We say response. Now, can I get the content of this? Let's await it as well. Response dot execute result async. Well, I imagine that does what we're after. Let's give it a context. New action context. Await. And that's my phone. Again, someone checking that I've not been stabbed. So. I need an auto response of me saying yes, I'm fine, thanks. Yep. Good. Right. What was I doing? Yes, action context. We need to actually assert what's happened on this, so let's make it into a variable. I think if we're going to repeat this a lot, which I suspect we will, we'll extract this into a method, but again, not yet, because, you know, I might not be right in this doing what I want. Well, we can cheat. We can go into our get method, and we're returning a JSON result. Let's go into the decompilation of that and see what happens. Value is set. And we can get at the value. So we can just cast it. But what does the execute result do? Gets a JSON result executor from somewhere and executes it on a context. Yeah, I think in the interest of making this easy to test, we shall get rid of all this and do this as JSON result. I assume the await awaits this before casting. Must do. Maybe. Right, so response dot content, was it object? Value. should be of type it was an empty array, I think. To be honest, I'm tempted to serialize it and just check that worked as I expect. So let's go back into our get method and have a look. We're giving it an IEnumerable, so it should be of type IEnumerable of toggle view. Well, that might work. Before I bother running this though, let's implement our next case. I think we'll put these on new lines as well. Yeah, much nicer. Right. So what we'll do is let's rename this JSON result and extract a variable for this, and I'll say response.toggles equals a new array of new toggle view. I wonder if AutoFixture supports .NET Core yet. NuGet. Why doesn't it focus the search box by default? I don't want to use the mouse. AutoFixture. Updated 2 days ago. Dependencies. That would indicate not. I think you always have .NET Standard on it. Supports under there. Oh well, we can try installing it and see what happens. This UI does not work well on the side. It's in my cache, which means I don't think... I definitely didn't last try installing it 2 days ago. Oh well. Right, let's see what errors we get. Let's have a look at the log. Yep, no .NET Core app, unless there's a pre-release package of it. No, it doesn't look like it. Oh well. Not to worry, we shall just rely on our new instances. Let's do 3 of them. And let's put them on one line because they're really not interesting to look at. Oh yeah, we should probably make the method async as well. And we should now be able to say this should be response.toggles. So we're now checking that we're actually getting the collection of toggles back rather than the whole response, which was a bug we fixed manually earlier. Again, my tests don't seem to load, so we'll just do them via the command line again. Now I've got 2 builds fighting each other. That'll be interesting. Smart security requires my attention. Well, it can't have it for the time being. I'm sure we had 70 tests last... Test script is not running all the tests. Now, how do I make .NET Core run all test projects? Maybe I can just give it a wildcard. All test projects in the directory solution without having to explicitly each subject directory. Yep. Yes, that's basically what I'm after. Okay, quite old project, Jason. Oh, we have another issue from it. Oh, that's VS test. Okay. Just ran into this today. Ah, this issue was moved to VS test. Okay. Oh, that's someone suggesting things. There is a way. After this, you can use .NET VS tests to execute tests. Ugh. Oh, you can specify multiple in a line. Ah, but you have to specify the assemblies. Right, so let's see if we can knock together a little bash script to do that. Find in source iname star.tests.dll type F. Right, we want to limit things in the bin directory. Can I do globs in this, I wonder? So star bin. Yes, I can. Right, we also have multiple versions showing up here, which I don't want. Let's do that, and then do git scrub. So scrub is an alias I have which just wipes out anything out of the Git repository that is not tracked by Git. So now when I run the find command, nothing. And if I do .NET build Crispin, then after this builds, when we run that test command, this time we should find all the tests. While that's going, if anyone wants to see any of the Git aliases I use on a regular basis, git config -- list pipe grep alias. That's all of the ones I use regularly. Commit, status, and diff cached I use a lot. And then we've got things like scrub, which cleans everything except for the package directory and the node modules directory, if you're using node as a build script. Save and undo just are useful if you're rebasing on branches quite often. So save all your pending changes, like commit them, and then undo will undo the last command on the last commit on the head of the branch and put things back in the directory as they were. And all of those are also in a repository called config on my GitHub as well. Right, so now if I rerun this find command, there we are. We now just have the test projects we want. And it looks like we might just be able to pipe the results. xargs.net test. Only one project can be specified. Well, that was rubbish. Hang on, this is VS test as opposed to test. Oh well, in which case we can do instead exec.net test, open shut brackets, escape, that? Is that the right way for escape? Clearly not. The project file can... Okay, this actually wants project files. Tests csproj. And as it's csproj files, we can just search in the source directory. Ooh. Ah, so that was our new test project. See, it's only got 3 tests, 2 passed, 1 failed. And then this one's got 70, great. So let's git reset head, head everything. And we will now take this command, do echo that onto the end of test.sh. Now if we go to here, we can now just delete that. Get add test. Tests. Oh, has that got dodgy line endings now? Yeah, dodgy line endings. Line feed only. Tests script. Fix test script to find all test projects. Right. And we had a broken test, so let's have a look. What is the problem for this? Should be of type enumerable, but it was actually an array. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I think what we'll actually do is cast this. We'll do I want to say it should be empty. Can I just do that? Empty should be empty. No, I do have to cast it to an enumerable, but I don't want to bind to any particular thing, so we'll just do an enumerable of toggle view, close bracket, close other bracket, should be, oh, I can't type, empty. Right, rerun our tests. Probably should have just done that. Phone again. Oh. It's a message not asking me if I've been stabbed. That's a nice change. Right, so now our tests work. Oh, no new line at the end of the file. Oh, I'm not having that. Oh no, I added one at the end of the file. That's fine. Would you go away? I'll deal with you later. Toggles controller. Add tests. Right, so we've now done get. The more interesting one is the create one, because we've not got a JSON result coming back from that. We've got a 201 created response along with a URL. So, fact, when creating a toggle, so we don't have to worry about the domain for this because we're faking the mediator. So we'll have our response equals new create toggle response, and that's going to have a GUID in it. And now we will set up mediator dot send arg.any create toggle request. Dot returns. Yeah, just returns the response. Oh, the repose? I can't type response. Or I've got a dodgy keyboard. It's more likely that I can't type, however. Right, so now we say var result equals await controller.post. Now this needs a model, so this is our post request. We're actually ignoring the content of it, so that'll be a separate test to check that things get passed through correctly. All I want to know at the moment is whether the response from this puts the right information in. I mean, we know it does, but it'd be nice to prove that with a test. Now, I have no idea what an OK or created response is. It is a created result. Now, we could actually change these to be JSON result and created result, because in all other cases we're going to be throwing exceptions, and we'll wrap an exception handler around this if there isn't one already. No, we can't do that because we might add validation here, and depending on what we decide to do, we might have, if you try and post the same name of a feature toggle, we might do a, is it 202 record exists? Just basically to not recreate it, but just tell them, hey, there's already something that exists with this name, here's the URL for it. So that would not be a created result. So in this case, we at least need to stay with action results. But again, I mean, I could put it in there for now and then worry about it later. Yeah. Right, as created result. Result location should be, I assume this is what we're after anyway, toggles /id /plus response dot toggle ID. Yeah, let's try that. And actually, as we're only caring about these tests at the moment, I'll do .net test source Crispin .rest.tests and just run that individual one rather than running them all, just because it's a little faster. Fast feedback loops are important. Right, 4 tests passed. Now, I've only tested the happy path so far, but that will do for the time being. So we can now do, let's add some more data to this. When creating a toggle, the location is response location is set, and then we will have this one, which is when creating a toggle, the I don't want to call it a mediator request. The request is populated. Right. So this time we are going to do this, we'll set up the mediator. We will turn a create toggle response. It's got a GUID on it, we don't actually care. And here we shall say await controller. Oh. Ooh, async void, tut tut, never do that. Await controller dot post. Now, this time we shall actually populate our values. Name equals the name, and description equals the desk. And as that's quite a long line, we'll wrap it as well. And rather than checking the response that we get from this, we're actually going to check that the mediator received what we wanted. We'll say mediator received send with an arg which matches a create toggle request, and do I have something called, no, I don't have something called request already, so I can do this. Let's put that on a new line. That, and that. So where the request name equals the, let's call this model, var model, where the request name equals the model name, and the request description equals the model description. Do I like .NET Core? Yes-ish. Yes, things are a lot better than they are. ASP MVC Core seems much better than the last version of MVC, whatever that was, 5, 6, 7. There's still rough edges on it. Weird things like command line don't quite work as well as I think they should. Yeah, documentation seems to be pretty good on it, so so far I've managed to find most things that I've not been able to work out how to do. I wish a few more libraries supported .NET Core, but that's not really Microsoft's fault as such. So yeah, it's alright. And ASP.NET Core seems fine so far as well. Bad white space. And obviously I quite like Rider as well, despite its rough edges as well. But, you know, it's still in RTM rather than release, so yeah. Toggles, controller, add, toggle, creation, tests. Now, I think the final thing I'm going to do this evening is knock together a little decorator just to show what we can do with mediation decorating. Now, why is that red? Okay, it's not anymore, right? Yes, so at the moment we're just passing everything into mediator and getting responses back. Now, it would be quite nice to put some metrics on that later. I haven't really decided what metrics I want to put on it yet, but we can just put some simple logging to just show that we can log request time, for instance. So what we shall do is come to our infrastructure namespace and add a class, and this is going to be our timing this will be spelt American, not English. IOR, not IUR. Tut tut. And mediator implements pipeline behaviors with an interface. So we'll need a T request. It's very similar to our handlers as well. T response. Right. And the interface, I think, is an I pipeline behavior. Yep. T request of T response, and there is a type parameter, but at least I thought it was a type parameter. Maybe there isn't. Well, that's nice. Yeah, I'm sure there was used to be a where clause on that. But what we can do in here is, well, this would effectively make our decorator do nothing. Need an await in there as well. For 2 days, it still doesn't really messed up for Windows. Well, I am running it on Windows. I don't know if it's because I've just installed the SDK and I'm using Rider rather than Visual Studio. I had a lot of problems getting it running on my Linux virtual machine, but on Linux, on a Linux live disk, on a live USB disk, it refused to work and gave lots of really weird errors. But under a virtual machine or directly on Linux hardware, that worked fine as well. That was .NET Core 1 though, not 2. Yeah, I kind of wish they'd kept the project JSON. I think I preferred that, but at least the CS proj is a huge step forward in the right direction. Now for actual logging, I read earlier that ASP.NET Core has structured logging built into it all over the place, and you can just plumb Serilog in behind it. I haven't taken a dependency on Serilog yet, so I'm just going to use the inbuilt logging. Now, if I remember what I read earlier, it's an iLogger of the class, which is a timing behavior of T request, T response. Logger. Right. And now I need a reference to something. I was sure it was called that. Right, what assembly is it in? It's in Microsoft Extensions Logging Abstractions. So let's go to NuGet and find that. And that one. Wow. What was that, the error? Oh, right, that project's still on net standard 1.4, not newer, so let's go into here and do a 2.0. Oh, I think it's, well, it's probably downloading half the internet again. I'm just going to take a screenshot of that so I can do a bug report to Rider. Presentation notification Notification. Why is typing and spelling so hard? Oh, hang on. Another message asking if I've been stabbed. I hope to never be stabbed. Right. Right. Good. What was I doing? Yes, installing NuGet. Installing NuGet packages, or trying to at least. Right. Now that we're on .NET 2. Installing Microsoft. Ah, good, it worked. Right, so now that that's done, there we go. So the container for ASP.NET Core will provide this for us automatically, and what we can now do in here is do something like var sw equals new stopwatch sw.start. Take this as a var response. Okay. Sw.stop, and then do logger.log. Is this information or is this debug? It's one of the many debates on logging. I don't like log levels like this. I don't like error, trace, warning, and information. I don't think it helps, especially if you take a large generally work-based code base, and the inconsistent levels of warnings throughout are problematic. What I normally do for this, and what we're trying to do, is replace it with things like logger dot wake someone up, which will trigger a pager alert. Logger dot a bad thing happened, we need to review it in the morning. Logger warning, this probably shouldn't have happened. If this happens a lot, investigate it. And then for information you have like logger dot something interesting happened, and then for debug something along the lines of logger dot spam me with stack traces. Obviously shorter names would be better than that, but the idea is that we give actual meaning to what the log levels are. So rather than a developer coming along going, I think timing information is informational, another developer might come along and go, it's actually tracing. If we named these things like, I don't know, so you had log timing, and you know it's to do with timing. Internally, this extension method, if we had a log timing extension method, could be doing the right thing, like saying it's a trace level event. So we're trying to come up with names for things that convey what we want to happen and are shorter than logger.page a developer who's going to be really angry about being woken up. On the plus side, angry developers getting woken up in the middle of the night tend to fix things so they don't get woken up. But for the time being, I think this can be... Is trace less or greater than debug? I honestly don't know. Does this have a... We have a log level enum, so... Let's do that and go to definition. So tracing is lower level than debug information. And none is the highest error? Okay. Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. Useful development doing have no long-term value. Trace. Sensitive application data. Never be enabled in a production environment. So it doesn't sound like it should be those. Information logs that the general flow. These should have long-term value. Well, we would be interested in something as it gets faster or slower, but I think we'll just say that it's debug for now. Log debug. Now we have to write some timing. Handling request took elapsed milliseconds. Yeah, that'll do. And then we'll do request.getType.name. And in here we'll put sw.elapsed milliseconds. Right. So now if we were to rerun, assuming it builds, if we rerun the API, we can execute a request and we should get a debug level message, assuming this is set to log debug. And I'm not sure if it is or not. Let's just check that, because this build takes quite a while. Startup. I don't know where you configure the logging. So, services.log. We've already got logging. Add logging x dot add debug. I don't know, maybe that's the right thing to do, maybe not. And run. I'm sure we'll get a nice exception if I've done something stupid. Oh, would probably help if I registered the decorator as well, because as it stands, that's not going to get used. Oh well, at least we'll find out if the logging actually cares that I've told it to do debug. Let's do a get to that. Oh, we didn't get any errors, and we only got info, so maybe it worked, maybe not. Right, now let's register that. So services.add transient. Now we can't use the generic form because we've got an open generic type. So we say type of I pipeline, not that, I pipeline behavior of something, and it'll take in a type of timing behavior of something. Now with luck, when mediator requests decides to build a handler and requests the pipeline to be constructed, we should get our timing behavior added into it. Can't build it because it's locked by the runningness, right? And if I do that, it'll auto build it. Should have just clicked the button in the first place. Right, so now if we go back to the rest test, let's just clear that, so, and run that. No, we didn't get any messages. Who's that this time? Oh, another person. Hang on a minute. Right. So in the interest of not doing that, because that apparently doesn't do what I think it does, let's go into our timing behavior and just log warning. Let's see what that does. Can I switch off word wrap in this somehow? No. There we are. There's our warning. Warning, that request took 9 milliseconds. If we run it again, 0 milliseconds. Compilation errors. Well, not errors, compilation overheads. So yeah, 0 seconds each time. Cool. Interestingly, we get 0 for our behavior, and then the actual controller itself takes a little bit longer. So what we could do later with this information is, rather than just log it, we could push this out to metrics, and then you'd be able to have a dashboard showing you your request time, for instance. That way you can monitor if your requests are getting slower over time and keep an eye on them, whether they are or not. Right, so I'm going to make that log debug again, because that feels like what it should be. And it was nice to note as well, where is my message, that it uses structured logging, because that's not using the interpolation. That is replacing them with the index value, similar to using that, but we have named properties instead. Right, yeah, so let's diff that. Get domain, add a mediator decorator for timings. Right, and push that. That's pretty much all I wanted to show for today. I will be back again tomorrow night, I think, to do this. And looking at our list of things here, we can either implement some more of the endpoints, or we could start implementing the storage solutions, or start adding in the metrics of things like logging of when toggles are queried as well as when they're changed or created. So we'll want to do something like a decorator on top of the API itself, rather than at the mediator level. So that should be fun. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you want to see any of the code, it's on my GitHub. It's github.com/ponderdom/Crispin. And if you want to ask any questions, feel free to follow or send me a message on Twitter. Same handle, so twitter.com/ponderdom. And all of the details are below the video in the channel as well. So yeah, thanks for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed it.